Hey everybody, what's up? This is a continuation of the top 5 legendaries for early game players video that I put out a few days ago. If you haven't seen that, I'll card to it up there. Basically what I'm going to do in this video is talk about 5 more. These aren't going to be in any particular order. We're just going to talk about 5 more legendaries that I think would be really, really good for early game players. So let's go ahead and do it. Alright, so again, before we get into it, I didn't mention in the first video, and I almost forgot to mention it here, we're not doing voids. This is excluding voids. I'm going to do another video where I talk about maybe the top 5 voids for early game players. So I've had a few people suggest a few of the void legendaries, and it occurred to me I did not remember to mention that in the last video. So this is non-void legendaries that I think are really good for early game players. So the first one we're going to talk about is Hackhorn Smash Lord. This dude is just a monster support. I do have a complaint about him, and we're going to get to it, but he's an HP champ. He's got really good base HP, good enough base speed. He has a 33% HP lead in dungeons, which is going to be really helpful. On his A1, he's got a stun, and it's worth noting that his damage is based on HP, so he is going to be able to output a pretty decent amount of damage. He's not a nuker by any stretch of the imagination, but for the support he's bringing and the crowd control and the utility and all the things he's bringing to a fight, the damage output from him is kind of nice too. So 40% chance to stun on an A1, that's not bad at all. He's going to stun a pretty good amount of the time for you. This is the real money maker for him though. It's on a 4-turn cooldown. It removes all debuffs from the whole team. Then it heals allies by 15% of his HP. Then it heals an extra 10% of his HP for each debuff removed from each champion. And then places block debuffs on all of them for 2 turns. So this is one of the best support skills in the game. There are not a ton of remove all debuffs from all allies. There are even less remove all debuffs from all allies and heal them. And then there are even less remove all debuffs, heals, and place block debuffs all in the same motion. That is, he may be the only one. Maybe Duchess? I'm having trouble remembering specifically what her kit does. There's not a lot of this going on, so this is super helpful, especially earlier game as you're trying to find support to fit into your dungeon teams. This is really, really nice to have, and I've had a lot of people who pulled him early in the game tell me how helpful he was to in them pushing deeper into the dungeons. Now, my complaint about him is this: sacrifices HP equal to 50% of his own HP, of his max HP, then attacks all enemies. Damage inflicted is equal to 50% of his HP. It can't crit, right? It's just straight math. Whatever his max HP is, it's going to do half that damage. The problem is he'll kill himself with it. So if he's at 40% HP and he uses this skill, he'll kill himself. I think that's really silly. I think that's really silly and really strange for someone offering this amount of utility. It seems like a strange thing to implement into his kit to have him potentially kill himself. Now the good news here is that he's going to be super tanky. He's going to be doing a pretty good job of healing the team and healing himself up. So it won't be super rare that he'll be under 50% HP and happen to have this skill ready to roll, right? Even so, I don't like it. I do think that he's really good even around it, and it's not like this won't do decent damage when he does it. I just feel like him killing himself with it is strange, or him putting himself in a really bad spot. If he's at 60% HP and he uses it, well, now he's super low, right? Now he's going to be much easier to kill and take out of the fight anyway. So I don't know. I feel like it's a weird skill, but I feel like the rest of the support that he offers outweighs it. I still think that he's really, really good for earlier game players trying to find that support, trying to get those teams built for the dungeons. So he's on the list. Coming in next, we have Bigun. That's Ignatius. That's his hot cousin. Bigun is just a wild AoE damage dealer. So it's not super. He's not complicated to use at all. Get damage on him. Get some speed on him. Get some damage on him. If you want his utility and you can, get some accuracy on him so he can knock back turn meters. But he's basically just here to smack. to smack everybody every time he does something. So as long as he's got the crit rate, his A1 will turn into an AoE. His A2 is an AoE with some utility, some crowd control. His A3 is a AoE as well with turn meter knockback and a speed break. He is just really good. You can turn him into a farmer fairly easily. He's going to, again, help you wave clear in dungeons. He can be your arena nuker. You can pretty much take him everywhere except probably Fire Knight and Clan Boss, right? So he's got a decent amount of widespread utility. Not going to be that hard to get the damage out of. Not going to be that hard to turn him into a farmer. And again, very straightforward. It's not like he's a super complicated champ where you really have to wonder what to do with him. Set him up to hit, let him hit, enjoy him. I think he's going to speed up progression a good bit with ease of building for farming. And again, wave clearing in dungeons, he's going to do a ton. So not a lot to talk about with him, but I think he belonged in here. I think he's a fantastic early game. I think he's good for a lot of other stuff too. It's not like I think he falls off after the early game. I just think that he's also really good for early game. I guess it's also worth mentioning, probably should have mentioned a little earlier in the video, this is not the top legendaries in the game. So understand that there are going to be some legendaries that are top tier, but are not necessarily on this list because they don't fit into the category of being, you know, that useful for early game players, if that makes sense. So anyway, let's talk about Nethril. Nethril is really, really good. And I feel like not enough people talk about this dude. I feel like there's a lot of people sleeping on Nethril. And I think he should get a little bit more love than he's been getting. So let's talk about why he's on this list. 1, 3-hitter A1, 5% poison each hit, right? So he's going to be a great poison stacker. He's got a 3-hitter, so that gives you some utility for Fire Knight. Again, he's good in Clan Boss. Anywhere where there's a boss, you can stack poisons. It's going to be very helpful. And he's got decent enough multiplier, so he does get damage even with his A1. AoE A2 with a stun and a decreased speed. This is, again, really helpful. Now, he only puts a speed up if they're not under a stun. So either way, it's doing something useful. If the target's not stunned, he puts a slow on him. But we're looking at an AoE stun here, which, again, can be very handy in PvP, can be very, very handy anywhere where there are waves of enemies. Crowd control is very desirable. It's going to make your life a lot easier. And again, he's doing decent enough damage with this on an AoE scale. So he's bringing damage and utility to anywhere in the game, basically. Then again, we've got another AoE, decreases turn meter by 75%. So really, for all intents and purposes here, it is a full turn meter reset on an AoE scale. It is really helpful, really handy. Double AoE, good damage, lots of control, and then just to top it all off, a lot of the time when you have someone who offers a lot of utility like this in waves or with multiple enemies, they will kind of fall off when you get to the boss because a lot of the times you can't do those things to bosses. He doesn't fall off because you'll get to the boss and then he can stack poisons on the boss to help you take the boss out of the fight quicker. So he, at no point in the fight is he going to fall off. And again, he's really, really good for Clan Boss. He can help you push through campaign. He can help you do more in arena. He's good everywhere. Literally everywhere in the game you can take this dude. Fantastic. Again, don't think he's getting enough love. So I think he belongs on the list. We're going to keep it in the Undead Hordes and move on to Bad L. Bad L, top tier, one of the best legendaries in the game. An example of one of those who also is really good for early game. Now, he's not necessarily a farmer. You know, with crazy enough gear, he can, but that's not really what he's for. He's not supposed to be a farmer. He's not supposed to be your damage dealer in that respect anyway. He is offering a wild amount of support. He's another example of someone that if you pulled, you stick on literally any team you've got. Literally any team in the game, he's going to help you. Even though he's not multi-hitting, he's still going to be helpful for Fire Knight if you wanted to use him in there. But literally, there's not content in the game. You can't take this dude and not feel his presence. So we've got an A1 AoE. Heals the whole team by 20% of the damage inflicted. So it's not like his multipliers are super high. He's not going to be doing a crazy amount of damage with this skill or anything, but considering that he's hitting on an AoE scale, it's still going to be decent damage. So the heal is going to be decent, right? It's crazy for an A1, and he's only got one more active skill. So after he uses this skill, this is what he'll be doing until this one's off cooldown. So it's going to add up over time, right? It's not a crazy big, huge heal that you'll notice like Hackhorn Smash Lord in one turn, but the accumulation over time is going to be very noticeable. You'll feel it when you don't have it. I'll put it like that. If you ran a team with it and then ran a team without it, you'd realize you didn't have it anymore, if that makes sense. His A2 is crazy. It is a full team cleanse, removes all debuffs from all allies. Remember, we talked about there are not a lot of those champs in the game. Also, 2 continuous heals on all allies for 2 turns, and 2 poisons on all enemies for 2 turns. So it's doing a lot on both ends of the fight. It's cleansing all debuffs from you and giving you continuous heals for the whole team, and then putting damage on the rest of the team. So it's super, super helpful. It's a really powerful skill. And if you can get a couple of books in it, you can get it down to a 3-turn cooldown, which is borderline, depending on how fast he is, permanent poisons on the enemy and continuing to stack them, and almost permanent continuous heals on the team. So just a ridiculous skill, going to make your life a lot easier. Then on top of everything else, he's got a passive where all allies do more damage to anyone under a poison debuff. And we just talked about the fact that he's basically going to keep poison debuffs on the enemy, which means it's basically a permanent 15% boost to your damage while he's on the team with you. And then as if that all wasn't enough, a 25% crit rate buff to all allies in all battles really alleviates that need to find that crit rate and crit damage. And we talked about in the last video how that's really one of the harder things to do early game, is find that crit rate, because you just don't have the gear for it, right? Which is why Queen Eva was so high on the list, because she alleviates that as well. But this is very helpful, and again, basically you can stick him on any team in the game and he's going to have an impact on it. So he will make your life much, much easier. So before I get to the last one, we are heading over to the Lizard Man faction. I want to say Rosin is a phenomenal champion. The reason that Rosin's not on the list is because you confuse this champ, okay? So I imagine, I would hope anyway that if I didn't mention Rosin, some people would in the comments would say, how come you didn't put Rosin on the list? Because Rosin's excellent, but we're not talking about Rosin because you confuse Rosin. And even though you can pull Rosin, I don't know, it felt strange to put a fusible legendary on here. But Rosin is excellent. You should be working towards that fusion if you're a new player. But we're going to cap this off talking about Fushan. And this might be a surprise to some of you, but I can speak from experience. He was my first legendary on my old account, and there was literally not a team he wasn't on. My arena team, every dungeon team, every potion dungeon team, campaign, clan boss, Fire Knight, when they put out Faction Wars, every single team in the game that I had built, this dude was part of. So let's talk about why I think that he is so good for an early game player. One, his base speed is really high. 106 is pretty solid base speed. Gonna be pretty easy to get enough speed on him to do whatever it is you need him to do. Solid enough base attack, good enough base defense, decent base HP. So you'll be able to increase his survivability a little bit if you need to. One of the first things we're going to talk about is this all battle 24% speed lead. Again, this means everywhere you take him, you make him your leader. He's adding 24% speed to everybody on the team. This is huge. This is huge. Speed is arguably the most demanding stat, most important stat in the game, and he really takes the pressure off trying to find it on your whole team everywhere you take him, okay? So that's huge. That's a really, really nice thing to have. And the fact that it's all allies in all battles is crazy. Very, very handy, okay? A1, 25% chance of placing an extra hit. Now, you might read this as he's got a 25% chance of hitting one more time. This can keep happening. I have seen him do this 4 or 5 extra hits on a very regular basis. And it'll add up. The damage adds up really quickly on this. especially once you have masteries done. I have seen him take huge chunks out of boss's health with his A1 continuing to hit. I have seen it go off a couple times in clan boss, and it adds up to a lot of damage. Again, with masteries done, it's really, really good. And real quick, while we're talking about clan boss, some of you might not be thinking he's going to be that good in clan boss. And while he's not going to be on any in-game clan boss teams, I wouldn't imagine, I was using him in clan boss for a long time on my old account, and I was getting 4 to 5 million damage just out of him in my clan boss runs with a hybrid build, right? Since I was using him everywhere, I made him a little bit tanky and a little bit of a damage dealer, and I had a lifesteal set on him, and his masteries were done, and I was getting over 4 million damage out of him pretty regularly in clan boss. So he can be effective in there for a while. Again, not an in-game clan boss champ, I wouldn't necessarily say, but that's a pretty solid amount of damage to be getting out of somebody that's not dropping poisons. So A2 attacks all enemies, 20% chance of placing a stun. Now, skilled up, you get more of a chance here. And I gotta say, maybe it's the fact that it hits twice, but this always felt like it was a much higher chance to stun. This was a very reliable stun. It was not uncommon for him to stun a full wave in dungeons or a full enemy team in arena. It just really always felt like this was much more than a 20% chance. It felt like a very reliable stun. I don't recall really ever having him use this and not stun anyone. I'm sure it happened, but I have many more memories of him stunning way beyond my expectations than not stunning at all. So it's a killer skill. 4-turn cooldown, can get to a 3-turn cooldown. And again, very reliable stun. And the damage output here is not bad. It's pretty good damage, right? So excellent skill. And then we've got an A3, attacks 4 times at random. Each hit has a 50% chance of placing a 60% decreased defense for 2 turns. Now, this is nice when there are multiple enemies in waves to kind of be able to randomly spread out defense break like that. But where this one really shines is once you're at a boss, when you're down to one enemy. So the boss in the dungeons or clan boss or whatever it is, 4 times, each hit has a 50% chance. He's pretty much never gonna not land a defense break with this skill. If you've got the accuracy on him to make it happen, it's gonna proc, right? Especially once you skill it up. You can also get this down to a 3-turn cooldown and get an extra 25% chance. 4 times, even at 50% chance though, it's, again, if you get your accuracy on him, he pretty much can't not land this. He's going to put a defense break up, and skilled up with masteries done, if you have debuff extension and he can land it for 3 turns, he can keep it up pretty regularly, right? He can keep a defense break on the enemy for most of the fight if it's a longer fight. So I just think he offers a ton. I think the speed lead is huge. I think the AoE solid damage with the crowd control here is really big. I think the basically guaranteed defense break on bosses is nice, and it's nice to spread it out in the waves. And then this can do a lot of damage, right? It can keep going off and do a lot of damage. And I think that, I think in the same kind of realm as Nethril, we talked about Nethril, I think Fushan is another one that doesn't get enough love. I've seen people, even newer players, pull him and be a little disappointed, and I don't think that's warranted. I think Fushan is a killer champ. He carried me through a lot of the game. I was able to do a lot with this dude, and I think he's a great champ. So that's it for this video. As always, let me know in the comments what you guys think about the list. If you have any thoughts on any of these champs, if there are any good early game legendaries that I didn't mention, of course, drop them below. More information is always better. Just kind of a fun discussion video. None of this is set in stone. I'm not going to go to bat really arguing over any of this. Just kind of some fun stuff to put out. So again, voids were not included in these, so I am going to be doing another video where I talk about what I think are the 5 best early game void legendaries to pull. So again, if you guys want to throw any input down and give me some things to think about, I'm all for the discussion and more information. So I appreciate you guys watching. If you're getting a kick out of this stuff, let me know. Like, subscribe if you're new here. All that stuff really helps me out. Other than that, I think we're pretty good. I think we covered everything we needed to cover here today. So I appreciate you guys watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon.